Have you ever known the right thing to do but decided not to do it? Maybe it was something small, like you were in the hallway at school and this freshman that you passed dropped all of his books and papers, and you could have easily stopped to help him pick him up. But you thought, I'm late to class and I don't know if he saw me, so I'm just gonna move right along. Or maybe it was something bigger, like you overheard someone making fun of your little sister and you could have stepped in and stood up for her, but you didn't. Or your mom said she needed to borrow some cash for groceries this week and you told her you didn't have any, which was a total lie. You just wanted to save your cash for a Taco Bell run later, so you let her run the grocery charges on her credit card. I could list 1,000 more examples, but you get the point. Choosing to do the right thing doesn't always come naturally, does it? Haven't we all had an opportunity to do what's right or to help someone else only to find ourselves looking and walking the other way? I think we can all agree that some people need our help. Helping people who don't have food to eat, water to drink, or a place to sleep is the right thing to do. And during certain seasons of the year, like around Christmas and Thanksgiving, or when something significant happens in our community, we're all more motivated to step up and help other people. But what keeps us from being motivated to help everyone in need all the time? What can make us move more than just a few key times every couple of years? If you're like me, being consistently motivated to help others is difficult. Why? Because we're unaffected. Their problem doesn't directly affect our lives, so why should we help? Because we don't really think our help even makes a difference. The problem is too big to solve, so why bother trying? Or we're simply too busy living our own lives. How can we possibly get involved in someone else's? Whether it's serving the homeless in our communities, investing in those who are hungry across the globe, or taking time to pay attention to ignored people around us, if we're honest, we just aren't that motivated. But what if we have the wrong motivation to begin with? Think about the times that you do help. For many of us, when we do help, it's because we feel guilty. But when guilt is your motivation, you get tired of feeling bad all the time. Sometimes we want recognition. Instagram likes and compliments feel great, but after a while, they are not enough to keep you motivated to keep serving. Or maybe you don't have any motivation at all. You have a hard time imagining the world a better place in any area, so it is much easier for you to just ignore the pain than deal with the inconvenience of doing something about it. It's important that we figure out what motivates us because that always determines our response. It's true in every area of our lives, including how we treat people. Think of it this way. What we believe on the inside determines what we do on the outside. Our inside motivation determines our outside actions. So what if we could find a better motivator? What if living our lives in a way that serves the hurting and desperate and hungry wasn't something that only happened when we were motivated by guilt or recognition? What if we could find a motivator that was a part of our daily lifestyle? Today, we're going to look at a passage from the Bible that will help us find the right motivation for helping other people. It's found in the book of Isaiah. Now, Isaiah is a book in the Old Testament, and it's a part of a group of writings called prophecy. Isaiah was a prophet, which just means that he was someone who heard directly from God and then spoke to people about what God said. So God would speak to a prophet like Isaiah, and then Isaiah would tell people exactly what God wanted them to hear. And that's basically the entire book of Isaiah. It's messages that God had for his people. And at the very beginning of the book, we find something that has to do with our motivation. Isaiah chapter 1 begins with a message from God to the people of Israel. He revealed to them a very specific set of laws and guidelines that he wanted them to live by, laws that would set them up for the most success. But even though God gave them very clear instructions, they quickly got off track. So God used prophets like Isaiah to remind them of the things that mattered most. Isaiah starts with some bad news. Many of their issues had to do with the way that they were treating one another. They were doing all the religious things and checking all of the right boxes, but something was missing. Although they were motivated to worship God religiously, they were ignoring the real needs of the people around them. The people in their communities were hungry, dying, and being taken advantage of. And the majority of the Israelites weren't motivated to do a thing about it. And God was not okay with this. So through Isaiah, God gave some pretty clear instructions. Stop going through the motions and start caring about the things I care about. God, through Isaiah, put it this way: wash yourselves and be clean. Get your sins out of my sight. Give up your evil ways. Now, this should be a clear indication of how upset God was. The Israelites were doing all the religious things, but God's basically saying, you're missing the point. Don't spend all your time at temple trying to make me happy. Leave and start taking care of the people around you. He wants them to understand that the life he designed for them is about more than being motivated by religion, guilt, or recognition. It's about something way better. So what does God care a lot about? Isaiah says this: learn to do good, seek justice, help the oppressed, defend the cause of the orphans, and fight for the rights of the widows. Now, out of all the ways that God could have instructed these people to live, he tells them to care for those who need it. The things that God wants them to do have very little to do with God himself. He didn't say, go to temple more, offer more sacrifices, and pray longer. No, what God said had much more to do with the people he made, the people he loved, who were living in need. The Israelites were great at having it all together on the outside, but God was not impressed. He wanted their hearts. He wanted them to be motivated to care for the people that he cared for. He didn't try to guilt them or shame them. He didn't try to tell them to work and strain harder. He just told them that the right way for them to live is to help those who need it. In other words, there's a better way to both live and follow God. Care about what he cares about. And God cares deeply about the needs of people around us. When we pay attention to that, it pulls us into that bigger story, and it draws us toward a life with more purpose than any we could ever create on our own. God desires for us to live a lifestyle of serving and helping those in need. And for those of us who follow Jesus, that's a great motivation to serve others. But it's more than that. God knows that we will have a more fulfilling life with greater purpose when we do. Being motivated by guilt will only work so long, and trying to ignore the needs of those around you will end up killing a part of you that's hardwired by God to notice and care. So instead, what if we allowed ourselves to be motivated by the way God sees the world? Through Isaiah, God told us as plainly as he could what he cares about. He views all people as worthy of being loved and served and cared for. He showed us that he wants us to live lives that prioritize the needs of those that he loves. So, how can we take this motivation and turn it into action? Let's look again at that verse from Isaiah. Learn to do good. I love that this is the first thing that we're told. It tells us what we kind of already know, even though it's not natural. We have to learn to do good, which means it's going to take some time and some practice and some very intentional decision making. But it also suggests that it's possible to do it. We can learn. For some of you, maybe the first thing you need to do is pay attention to the good that's being done around you and then practice what you see modeled. Seek justice. We live in a world surrounded by injustices. People are treated unfairly because of their race, religion, gender, background. Maybe you've even been on the receiving end of that unfair treatment. And you need to know that God cares a lot about that. In fact, God cares more about justice than he does the number of times that you go to church or how much of the Bible you read today. When he sees people being mocked, hurt, or ignored, he notices, and he really, really wants us to do something about it. We get to act on God's behalf when it comes to injustice. So look for it. Look for the people who are treated unfairly. Look for people who aren't given a fair chance. Help the oppressed. I know that oppressed isn't a word that you normally use to describe people, but you know what it means. People who are knocked down and treated poorly. What if you spoke up on behalf of the person being bullied? What if you choose to be friends with someone most people choose to ignore? What if you volunteer your time with an organization that's working to bring justice to those who are treated unfairly? What if You start a fundraiser to help provide clean water for those who don't have access to it. What if you decide to go on a mission trip at some point this year to help people who don't have the same resources you do? Opportunities are all around us. We just have to look for them, pick one, and then jump in. Defend the cause of the orphans and fight for the rights of the widows. Now, back when Isaiah was written, the orphans and widows were the most vulnerable people. They were the most likely to be hurt or taken advantage of. So when Isaiah tells the people this, he's telling them that God cares a lot for the people that you might not expect. People expected God to favor the rich and the powerful, but God told people, go after the unnoticed. And we should do the same. Look out for people who don't have a voice of their own. This could mean volunteering your time at a group foster care home to remind kids that they are loved by someone and that they're loved by God. You could find a single parent in your church and offer to babysit so that they can run errands or get some rest. Or you can help a single parent or elderly person with their yard work or house cleaning. There are still orphans and widows all around us. This isn't just some symbolic thing. We can still care for these groups of people and remind them how much God cares about them. Imagine if every one of us chose to learn, seek, help, and defend. Imagine if we saw the people God cared about with the same compassion He does. And I think it's an opportunity for us, not just to pacify our guilt or fulfill some obligation, but to be the voice of God to people who really, really need to be noticed and loved. When we see it with that type of significance, our beliefs on the inside will work in harmony with our actions on the outside. If every one of us chose to do something because we were motivated to care about the people that God cares about, the world around us would begin to change for the better. Our inside motivation determines our outside actions. And when our motivation comes from a desire to partner with God and the work that He's doing around us, we'll be able to work with a new type of energy. It can be so easy for us to ignore the needs of those around us. And it's so easy to choose not to serve because we don't have the right motivation. Trust me, I get that. But when we understand that God cares deeply about the needs of all people, not only does our motivation change, the world changes too. Remember, the motivation within us should be determined by how God views the world around us. When we get this, we discover that we are the ones who change for the better.